No other man in the martial arts history has had first-hand experience in the bare knuckle era of the 60s. Part of the first World Taekwondo Championships in the 1974 Dream Team, U.S. versus the Europe team fights. Tonight, we have Karate Stories author, Mr. Jim Butin, from the Blood and Guts days, era of tournament karate. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the show. Wow, I wanted to open up a little different, just like hit you in the face of that right cross so you didn't block with who we're having tonight. And it's just exciting being in your home tonight for us to share with you this hour, and that you love sport karate as much as I do, and the history generals and the people that interview and the people that listen. We are pioneer, author, coach, master instructor, champion fighter of the Blood and Guts era. Jim Butin is a legend among his peers as being one of the first stars of sport karate in America. When asked who his instructor is for all these years, leading up to his incredible reputation, it is world champion J. Pat Burleson, who has guided him through the years to be the important level high dan rank of 10th degree black belt, which he promoted him last year to his prestigious accolade in his career. It was Mike Anderson, the founder of the Top 10 Products, who persuaded Mr. Butin into leaving his beloved country of Texas. That's right, to cross the border and invade Oklahoma, to open karate studios where he's been there to this day, still answering the phone, sharing his knowledge and his incredible skills. However, let's go back a few years. Part of Jim's journey was, well, he was picked to represent his country on the USA team in 1974. And what type of training, competition, and fighters did he need? And remember, the early years, it was not called Blood and Guts because it was a gimmick. It was a time when a karate tournament would come through the city, and the hospitals would be busy after the event, taking care of stitches, broken arms, busted lips, and broken noses. Jim is an original history general for the Sport Karate Museum Archives. He has been a featured guest for many of the Living Legends roasts. In fact, he was one of the first ones that we produced 19 years ago. He was there. That's right. And he has supported the efforts of being a special guest each year at the Super Show in Las Vegas at the Sport Karate Museum display and booth, signing autographs and telling his personal war stories from his incredible book, and from his personal account of a special time in sport karate English. Please welcome this icon of sport karate to the AMAA Masters and Pioneers Radio Parts Unknown show, Mr. Jim Butin. Jim, are you there, brother?
I am, Gary. Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited and honored to be a part of this program. Started in 1965 under Pat Burleson, and he was my instructor from the get-go, and I made black belt under him in 1968.
Mr. Burleson's been your very first and foremost instructor from the get-go, so God bless you.
Yeah,
tell
absolutely.
me how you started and how you walked into a karate school, and you know we'll lead into it, but let's dance a little bit, little brother. Tell me how you started,
sure.
How you got influenced.
Yeah, well, I was only 16. I was 16 when I started, and I didn't really have anybody jumping on me, but I did see some bullying episodes at school and just around the block, and I always wondered, what would I do if somebody tried to jump on me and tried to hurt me? And as it turned out, I had a couple of friends that were getting ready to get started. Master Burleson was teaching at a rec center. It was very inexpensive because I had to pay for it myself. I was working as a sack boy, and it was only $12 for 3 months. So it was definitely affordable for me to be able to get there and do it. And once we were established, the 3 or 4 friends that I had, they all quit, and I didn't. I just stayed with it. I remember a story that I was probably I might have been a white belt, I might have been a green belt, I'm not sure where I was in that deal, but I remember that he pulled a guy out of the line. We were all lined up getting ready to start the class, and he pulled this guy out, and he moved up next to the guy, and then he got in a good stance, and he hit this guy with a body punch, with a reverse punch, and the guy folded up, lost his air, hit the ground, started moaning, and Pat looked at the guy, and then he looked at the class, and he said, "That's a reverse punch. If you do it right, that's what's going to happen every time." And then he looked at the guy, and he said, "Get back in line." Well, you know, the guy did get back in line, but I don't remember him ever coming back. And I always knew that could happen to me, you know, the very next class. But I kept going. And fortunately, he never pulled me out of line like that and had me do that same laying on the floor scene.
Well, you know, I love the story of your black belt test And just for my listeners, kind of give me a little synopsis of your favorite part.
Chuck Lovin and a guy named Bill Pipes. No, it wasn't Bill Pipes. It was a couple of other guys, David Melville. They were testing for black belt. There was 3 of them. And I watched the test, and it was awesome. And I thought, oh, man, I don't know if I can ever do that. Then when I made brown belt, I was excited. I started finally winning in some competitions. I didn't do well in tournaments until I was a brown belt. And I'd won maybe 5 or 6 trophies in the brown belt division, and Pat came up to me and said, it's time for you to test for black belt. And I thought, what? You're going to make? Now I'm just starting to get this thing together, and you're going to put me in there with the big dogs. I don't know if I'm ready. And I went ahead and took the test, but I was there. I was the only one there doing the testing for the black belt level. And the thing I didn't understand, but I finally learned, is that when there was 3 guys testing, they weren't all fighting at the same time. There was one guy fighting another guy, and the other 2 were sitting down. And then one of those guys would get up, and he'd have to fight, and then he would sit down. So everybody was getting some rest. And on my deal, being the only guy, it was hot. It was June the 2nd, 1968, and Pat Burleson just kept having guys, one after the other, stand up and go after me. And it was sometimes 2 at a time, sometimes 3 at a time, sometimes just 1 at a time, but I was totally exhausted. I think it was like 106 outside, and he had one little air conditioner, 5,000 BTU unit, that was blowing on the judges' table. Wasn't blowing on me. And I actually was on my knees, shaking my head, trying to say, I quit. I cannot do this. And then Master Burleson said, you, get him. And I had to stand back up in a hurry, and those guys just bowled me over and just destroyed me. But fortunately, that was that last match. And then they hauled me outside and laid me on the hood of a car. And like I said, it was 106 outside, but that car felt so cool to me because of the problem in breathing and the heat that was in that little dojo. Pat Burleson had a place on Camp Bowie in Fort Worth, and it was a pie-shaped building, and it was just always cramped and small. And so the heat in there was just awesome. So I was able to endure the deal. I was awarded my first-degree black belt. I heard that Talana Burleson was Pat's wife, and she wouldn't talk to him for 2 weeks after watching that test because she didn't think that I should undergo that much punishment. So wow. I was pretty impressed.
You know, today's people who do martial arts, and I'm talking about, say, for the past, let's say, I'm gonna say 20 years, and I know for the last 10 years for sure, they earn their black belt, which I'm sure they have, but they don't even realize what the guys did in the early years. And it's overwhelming when you realize what type of work that you guys had to do besides the physical work, the mental preparation, because that not just getting out there and physically going through a non-air conditioned building, but having the pressure of what you shared with my listeners, because that was probably the most pressure you ever had in your life before doing that. You know,
the whole attitude was a little bit different then too, Gary. It was kind of like there weren't any kids involved in martial arts. It's pretty much an adult level thing back then. And the attitude was, just like I said about that guy that got knocked to the floor, it's like, if you can't handle it, the door is right over there, and if you don't come back, we don't care. You know, it was kind of that macho attitude of you'll endure if you want it.
In the same era, when I know that you probably know the answer. I mean, I know the answer, but I got to ask. When Phyllis Evetts was part of that group? Yeah,
Phyllis was one of my students at the General Dynamics Recreation area. That's where I started training. Yeah, and Phyllis, and Phyllis was so tough too, because she was the only girl in the class, and a lot of the guys were kind of macho about that deal and said, "What have we got this girl in here for?" And it was kind of an attitude like, "Well, if we hit her hard enough, she won't come back." and the deal was that Phyllis always came back, and she started hitting as hard as anybody in there because she wanted it that bad.